The year is 1880, and New York City is choking on its own brilliance. Every evening, lamplighters climb their ladders with burning torches, igniting 7,000 gas jets that hiss and sputter like serpents of fire. But beneath this golden glow, the city groans under the weight of its own ambition. Coal smoke blackens the snow before it even touches the ground. Horses collapse in their traces, exhausted from hauling streetcars up and down Manhattan's hills. Into this world of flickering flames and dying horses, three men prepare to change everything. In the opulent offices of Wall Street, financiers gamble fortunes on the next miracle. They speak in hushed tones about a man in New Jersey who claims he can bottle lightning. Thomas Alva Edison, already famous for his talking machine that captured voices in tin, stands in his Menlo Park laboratory like a modern-day wizard. "I will make electric light so cheap," he declares to the reporters crowding his doorway, "that only the rich will burn candles." His voice carries the confidence of a man who has already transformed sound into something you can hold in your hand. Across the Atlantic Ocean, a 24-year-old Serbian engineer named Nikola Tesla steps onto American soil for the first time. He carries little more than a letter of introduction and visions that have haunted his dreams since childhood. While Edison works with direct current, Tesla dreams of motors that spin without commutators, without the sparking brushes that eat themselves alive. 300 miles west, in the soot-blackened city of Pittsburgh, another player enters the game. George Westinghouse, who made his first fortune inventing the railway air brake, stands on the observation platform of his private rail car. He smells opportunity in the air like ozone after lightning. The continent stretches dark and hungry for power. From the gaslit parlors of Boston to the oil lamp saloons of San Francisco, Americans live by flame and muscle. But change is coming. It crackles through telegraph wires. It hums in laboratories and workshops. 3 men, 3 visions, 1 prize worth billions. The war of currents is about to begin. The morning fog still clung to the East River when Thomas Edison arrived at 257 Pearl Street, a nondescript brick building that would soon become the beating heart of America's electrical revolution. He carried no blueprints, no grand ceremonial key, just the same calloused hands that had wired telegraph keys and built phonographs in makeshift workshops across New Jersey. Inside the Pearl Street station, the air vibrated with anticipation and coal dust. 3 massive dynamos, each the size of a railway locomotive, stood like iron sentinels, their copper windings gleaming in the gaslight. These were Edison's latest triumph, direct current generators, capable of producing 110 volts, enough to illuminate the future, but not yet powerful enough to betray their fatal weakness. At precisely 3 o'clock in the afternoon, September 4th, 1882, Edison grasped the brass knife switch. The moment stretched like a held breath. Then, a click. And somewhere in the financial district, 59 customers watched their gas lamps flicker and die as electric light bloomed in their offices and counting houses. The New York Times would call it the miracle of Pearl Street, but the real miracle was invisible. Copper conductors as thick as a man's wrist running through iron pipes beneath the cobblestones, carrying Edison's direct current for exactly 1 square mile. Each conductor was insulated with tar and wrapped in cotton, then buried in sawdust to prevent overheating. That evening, at Madison Avenue and 36th Street, J. Say Pierpont Morgan stood in his opulent study as electricians completed the first private residence wired for electricity. The financier's mansion became a cathedral of light, 385 electric lamps casting shadows that danced across Persian carpets and oil paintings. Morgan's guests arrived in carriages to witness the future, their faces glowing in the unearthly brightness that never flickered, never needed trimming, never produced the noxious fumes of gas. But behind the celebration, engineers whispered troubling calculations. For every mile that Edison's direct current traveled, it lost power like water leaking from a cracked vessel. The mathematics were brutal. To electrify just Manhattan would require a generating station every few city blocks, each one burning coal, each one staffed by men, shoveling fuel into furnaces that never slept. The copper alone would bankrupt them. In those first weeks, copper prices soared as investors scrambled to buy shares in Edison Electric. The metal that carried Edison's current became more precious than silver, more coveted than gold. At the Pearl Street station, the boilers hissed through the night. feeding cold to the dynamos that fed copper, that fed light. Edison stood among the machinery, listening to the rhythm of his creation, unaware that 600 miles away in Pittsburgh, George Westinghouse was studying these same limitations with the cold precision of a man who had made his fortune solving impossible problems. The Wizard of Menlo Park had conquered darkness, but his victory carried the seeds of its own limitation. Every glowing filament in every office and mansion was a reminder of the copper arteries that could stretch only so far before the lifeblood of electricity weakened and died. As dawn broke over Pearl Street on September 5th, 1882, the boilers cooled and the dynamos fell silent. Edison had given the world its first taste of commercial electricity, but the feast would demand more than his direct current could deliver. Somewhere in the distance, a Serbian inventor was perfecting a motor that would turn Edison's triumph into yesterday's miracle. June 6, 1884, a 28-year-old Serbian inventor steps onto American soil with exactly 4 cents in his pocket, a letter of introduction to Thomas Edison, and a mind blazing with visions of rotating magnetic fields. Nikola Tesla has crossed the Atlantic with nothing but the conviction that alternating current could spin a motor without brushes or commutators, a dream that would soon ignite the greatest technological war in human history. Within days, the penniless immigrant finds himself in Edison's Manhattan offices, presenting his letter from Charles Batchelor, Edison's European representative. Edison barely glances up from his workbench, grease-stained fingers clutching a direct current dynamo. But something in Tesla's burning eyes makes him offer $20 a week to repair the company's most stubborn machines. For months, Tesla works 18-hour days, crawling inside the massive direct current generators that power New York's first electric district. His European education allows him to diagnose problems others cannot see, and soon the Edison engineers whisper about the strange foreigner who speaks to machines like living creatures. But every night, as he walks home through gaslit streets, Tesla's mind spins with alternating currents that could travel hundreds of miles on slender copper wires, while Edison's direct current dies after just 1 mile from the generator. One autumn morning, Tesla corners Edison in the machine shop, unrolling his hand-drawn diagrams across a workbench covered with direct current components. "Mr. Edison," Tesla whispers, his accent thick with excitement. "If we use alternating current and rotating magnetic fields, we can transmit power across entire continents." Edison's eyes narrow behind wire-rimmed spectacles as he wipes oil from his hands. "Spare me that splendiferous nonsense," he growls, turning back to his direct current dynamo. "Direct current is safe, proven, profitable. Your alternating current is a death current, suitable only for hanging murderers." The rejection cuts deep. Within weeks, Tesla resigns in frustration, his dreams of proving alternating current's superiority seemingly crushed. Penniless and alone, he finds himself digging ditches for the Edison construction crews, burying the very direct current lines he knows are obsolete. For $2 a day, the genius who will revolutionize the world breaks his back in muddy trenches, but his mind never stops calculating. During lunch breaks, while other workers eat sandwiches and smoke pipes, Tesla sketches polyphase motor designs in the dirt with a stick. He visualizes coils rotating in perfect synchronization, magnetic fields spinning like dancers, power flowing across entire continents on wires no thicker than a pencil. Each shovelful of earth brings him closer to the moment when he will prove Edison wrong, when alternating current will make direct current as obsolete as whale oil. The immigrant with the rotating dream has hit rock bottom, but from these muddy trenches will rise the electrical system that will power the 20th century. May of 1887. The city of New York is already sweating under an early summer haze, but inside the patent office on F Street, a quiet revolution is being notarized. Nikola Tesla, still smelling of trench-digging soil and lamp oil, lays 7 applications on the counter, like playing cards that will trump an empire. Each sheet is a fortress wall of ink, rotating magnetic fields, polyphase currents, induction motors humming in silent perfection. He signs with a flourish, date inked in full, May 16, 1887, and walks out a pauper who now owns tomorrow. Across the Alleghenies, George Westinghouse hears the news within 48 hours. He boards the overnight express, black coat swirling behind him like a battle flag. carrying nothing but a checkbook and a gambler's grin. The meeting happens in a smoke-filled parlor of the Fifth Avenue Hotel. Westinghouse offers $60,000 cash and a royalty of $2.50 for every horsepower sold. Tesla, who has eaten nothing but bread and coffee for weeks, extends his hand before the sentence is finished. Overnight, the immigrant climbs from cellar trenches to silk-curtained drawing rooms. Newspapers christen him the electrician of the future, and investors who once slammed doors now leave calling cards on silver trays. But in Menlo Park, Thomas Edison watches the headlines with the cold fury of a general whose supply lines have been cut. He paces between phalanxes of direct current dynamos, each one suddenly looking antique. Edison summons his publicist and utters a phrase that will echo through courtrooms and newspapers for years. Alternating current is the executioner's current. Within days, pamphlets flood New York warning mothers that AC will leap from lamps into cradles. Edison funds the purchase of stray dogs, then calves, then an aging circus elephant named Topsy, all to be electrocuted in public spectacles. Westinghouse does not flinch. His engineers scale Tesla's elegant two-phase coils into 1,000 horsepower behemoths taller than a townhouse. Each completed machine is loaded onto flat cars under armed guard, bound for the Chicago Fairgrounds already rising on the lakefront. Edison retaliates by slashing the price of direct current patents to pennies, trying to smother AC in its cradle. But Westinghouse merely smiles and wires more orders. The battle moves from laboratories to legislatures. Edison's lobbyists push laws limiting AC voltage to levels that would strangle the new system in red tape. Tesla, now consulting from a suite in the Waldorf Astoria, drafts counterbriefs dense with equations and moral outrage. Investors divide like armies. J.P. Morgan quietly doubles his stake in Edison, while the Vanderbilt family backs Westinghouse. The war of currents is declared not with cannon, but with copper. Every mile of wire laid becomes contested ground. Newspapers tally casualties, linemen electrocuted, horses killed by stray arcs, factories burned when transformers explode. Yet amid the smoke, Tesla's machines keep spinning, smoother and quieter than any dynamo Edison ever wound. By winter, orders pour in from as far as Denver and New Orleans. Edison doubles the voltage on his Pearl Street feeders, hoping brute force will hold the line. But the arcs only convince the public that direct current is the true menace. Tesla, invited to lecture at Columbia College, demonstrates a wireless lamp that glows in his bare hand. The audience gasps as one, and the future tilts another degree toward alternating current. By the close of 1888, the patents, the dollars, and the lightning have all found their allegiance. The Shock Campaign. By the first week of January 1889, the battle between direct and alternating current has moved from the laboratory to the street corner. Thomas Edison, once the smiling wizard of Menlo Park, now prowls his Fifth Avenue office like a sleepless general. He pins a note to his secretary: "Find dogs. Find Harold Brown. Spare no expense." Across the river, George Westinghouse watches the headlines with mounting disgust. He knows Edison's aim is not merely to discredit alternating current, but to brand it with the mark of Cain. February snow still clings to the blackened bricks of Edison's Pearl Street station when the first demonstration is arranged. A mongrel terrier, ribs showing through matted fur, is led onto a makeshift platform. Harold Brown, a failed inventor turned freelance electrician, steps forward with the theatrical gravity of a hanging judge. He announces that the dog will die by the Westinghouse current, though the generator humming behind him bears Edison's nameplate. A lever slams home. The animal convulses, smoke rises from singed fur, and the audience gasps in a single breath of horror. Newspaper artists dash off sketches before the body cools. Within days, the term Westinghouse becomes slang for sudden, violent death. Edison doubles the budget. Calves, horses, even an aging circus elephant named Topsy will meet the same fate in makeshift arenas from Brooklyn to Buffalo. Meanwhile, in Washington, a quiet lobbyist slips envelopes to members of the New York State Prison Commission. Edison wants the first electric chair, and he wants it powered by Westinghouse machinery. In Auburn Prison, carpenters build the chair according to Brown's specifications. William Kemmler, condemned for the drunken axe murder of his common-law wife, becomes the unwilling star of the coming spectacle. June melts into July. Westinghouse's attorneys file injunction after injunction, claiming the prison intends to use generators stolen from his factory. Each petition is denied, and the execution date is set for the 6th of August. At dawn that fatal Thursday, crowds gather outside the prison walls like mourners at a public hanging. Inside, Kemmler is shaved, strapped, and fitted with a skull cap of braided copper wire. A hush falls as the dynamo whirs up to speed. The first jolt, 1,000 volts for 17 seconds, should have stilled the heart instantly. Instead, Kemmler convulses but breathes on, a low animal moan escaping his lips. Witnesses recoil, one faints clean away. A second surge, 2,000 volts, roars through the wires. The smell of burning flesh fills the chamber, like a battlefield after cannon fire. After 4 minutes of spasms, the doctor finally pronounces death, but the horror is complete. Newspapers scream of a bungled burning. Edison retreats to West Orange, insisting the fault lay in Kemmler's anatomy, not in the current itself. Yet the tide begins to shift. Westinghouse unveils a compact step-down transformer that delivers safer voltages to homes. Public fear, so easily kindled, now meets the cooler flame of reason. By the first frost of 1890, investors who once fled Westinghouse return, their ledgers open to a new arithmetic. The shock campaign has shocked the world, but it has shocked Edison most of all. May 1st, 1893. Dawn over Lake Michigan brushed the water with rose and copper, while on the marshy shore of Jackson Park, 200,000 glass globes waited in silence for their cue. Steam winches hissed as workmen made the last adjustments to the switchboards inside the Westinghouse powerhouse. At precisely 8 o'clock, Chief Engineer Charles Proteus Steinmetz pressed the master lever. Across the court of honor, every bulb flared to life at once, turning plaster colonnades into alabaster cliffs. 12 Tesla coils, each 3 stories tall, rose like silver cacti on the roof of the electricity building. Their invisible fingers of voltage wrote luminous signatures across the darkness that could be read in Milwaukee. Searchlights, the first ever seen by most visitors, swept the horizon, pinning excursion steamers in cones of blinding white. Inside the manufacturer's building, a miniature city glowed, railway signals, electric kitchens, even a butter churn driven by a silent motor. But the true marvel waited on the Midway Plaisance. George Ferris had built a wheel 264 feet high, its 36 cars each the size of a Pullman coach. Tonight it turned for the first time, lifted by 2 1,000-horsepower Westinghouse alternating current motors. 2,160 souls rose gently above the prairie, higher than any human had ever traveled without a balloon. Below them, the court of honor became a chessboard of light and shadow. From the balcony of the New York State Pavilion, Tesla himself watched, arms folded, black coat stirring in the lake breeze. He had not slept in 48 hours. Every circuit carried his name, yet tonight the world belonged to Westinghouse. Across the nation, newspapers spoke of the White City at night, a phrase coined by the Chicago Tribune. Every paragraph, every engraving was a quiet requiem for direct current. In Menlo Park, Thomas Edison refused the engraved invitation to speak at Electricity Day. Instead, he walked the laboratory grounds alone, past dynamos now silent and smelling of disuse. J.P. Morgan, once the staunchest champion of the Edison Electric Light Company, attended the exposition incognito. He stood beneath the great wheel, calculating passenger fares and kilowatt prices with the same cold eye. That evening, he cabled his brokers, begin discreet accumulation of Westinghouse preferred. The fair closed each midnight to the sound of the Westinghouse Symphony of Light, 30,000 bulbs fading in sequence like a lullaby to the 19th century. When the last light winked out, the lagoon lay black and still, but the future had already been decided. By winter, Edison Electric would merge, drop its founder's name, and march under the new banner of General Electric, armed at last with alternating current. Tesla, ever restless, turned his gaze to Niagara, where turbines spun faster than Ferris's wheel and promised to power a continent. But for 6 enchanted months, the White City had shown 6 million visitors what electricity could be: safe, silent, abundant, beautiful. And every bulb, every spark, every turning spoke the same quiet verdict: the war of currents was over. November 16th, 1895. Dawn at Niagara. The river, black and swift, hurled itself over the cliff with a roar older than memory. But this morning, the thunder carried a new note. Steel on steel, the low thrum of destiny being wound tight. Inside Powerhouse Number 1, built of red brick and iron ribs, engineers clustered around a gauge whose needle trembled like a hunted thing. At 8:52, the penstock valves opened. Water, squeezed through pipes wide enough to swallow a streetcar, struck the twin turbines Tesla and Westinghouse had wrestled into place. The 5,000 horsepower generators, each taller than a church door, began to turn. A low hum rose to a steady song, and the first 11,000 volts leapt into the copper arteries that stretched 22 miles south to Buffalo, Lamero Demonere. Telegraph keys clattered the news along the New York Central line. In Buffalo, streetcars waiting at Maine and Seneca suddenly lurched forward without horses. Factory whistles answered each other in astonishment across the grain elevators and steel mills. That night, atop the powerhouse roof, engineers uncorked champagne smuggled in from Rochester. They tilted their glasses toward the falls, whose endless cascade now served mankind rather than merely wearing away the continent. Someone threw the switch on a battery of arc lamps arranged on the cliff edge, and the word power blazed white against the black gorge. Newspaper extras hit the streets before midnight. The Buffalo Evening News declared, "The age of electricity is born." Men who had wagered their fortunes on direct current read the words and felt the ground shift beneath them. 3 weeks later, Thomas Alva Edison arrived in a private Pullman car. He walked to Powerhouse alone, coat collar high, derby pulled low. He watched the meters dance, listened to the alternator's steady heartbeat, and finally spoke, not for the newspapers, but quietly to Westinghouse, who stood beside him. The alternating current, he admitted, is the only system that can meet the requirements. No trumpets marked the surrender, no flags were lowered. The war ended, not with signatures, but with the ceaseless roar of falling water turned into light. Within a year, lines reached Albany, then New York City itself. Tesla's polyphase system, once dismissed as witchcraft, became the pulse of the continent. Edison returned to Menlo Park, and to new inventions, storage batteries, motion pictures, yet always within the alternating current world Niagara had ordained. Years later, when asked if he felt bitter, Tesla merely pointed toward the horizon, where transmission lines glimmered like harp strings against the evening sky. The thunder that once belonged only to nature now sang the daily hymn of civilization. The morning of January 1st, 1900, was quiet along Fifth Avenue, yet every window glowed with the steady, humming gift of alternating current. From Boston to San Francisco, steel towers carried Tesla's three-phase lines across prairies and mountains, binding the continent in copper veins. The patents that had made Westinghouse's fortune now began to slip into the public domain, one by one, like autumn leaves loosening from their branches. Tesla, 38 years old and already a legend, collected a final royalty check for $150,000, wealth that should have secured any man's future. Yet within months, the restless inventor had poured the money into new laboratories on Houston Street, chasing wireless dreams that refused to be still. Meanwhile, in West Orange, New Jersey, Thomas Edison turned his back forever on the current war. Inside the vast machine shop, he unveiled the kinetoscope, a wooden cabinet with a peephole that showed moving pictures a few seconds long. Crowds queued down the block to watch Fred Ott's sneeze flicker in the dark, and Edison, ever the showman, sold the dream of sight itself. By 1903, he had merged his phonograph company with motion picture patents to create the first entertainment empire, a realm where alternating current served merely as obedient stagehand. Across the river, George Westinghouse watched his own empire shift. The panic of 1907 shook even his sturdy finances, and in 1911, he was forced to cede control of the company he had built. Still, the Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company survived, forging turbines for the new century, until, in 1919, it merged with its old foe to become the General Electric we know today. The rivalry that had once crackled like lightning now settled into quiet footnotes. Tesla's patents expired entirely by 1914, leaving him without claim to every socket and switch that bore his genius. He moved from hotel to hotel, always feeding the pigeons that flocked outside his windows. On January 7, 1943, a chambermaid at the New Yorker Hotel found him dead in room 3327, alone, save for the birds. Edison, too, had passed. On October 18, 1931, his bedside lamp dimmed at his request so he might go out with the light. Yet every time we press a switch, the war they fought continues to hum. Tesla's polyphase system carries power hundreds of miles, but Edison's relentless promotion taught the world to demand it. Together, though neither would admit it, they forged the grid that powers hospitals, factories, and midnight dreams. The thunder of Niagara now murmurs through every wall socket, a quiet victory song. And so the storm passed, leaving only the steady, brilliant glow, proof that even bitter rivals can illuminate the same world.